Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to episode 77 of the WP Builds podcast. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England, and I'll be joined a little bit later by David Wormsley from davidwormsley.com. Today's episode is entitled UI That Rocks, Understanding Gestalt Design Principles with Piccia Neri. It was published on the 24th of May 2018. Please go to the wpbuilds.com website and click all the buttons underneath the player. You can share our podcast on iTunes and a whole load of other places, Google Play and so on and so forth. And it's always really nice when we get reviews. We read them all and we try to correspond with the people who write things to us. It's very, very nice when we get some pleasant commentary back. Thank you for all of that. Okay, so everything I'm about to say is preceded by wpbuilds.com. So, for example, wpbuilds.com/Facebook gets you into our Facebook group, /subscribe gets you on our newsletter, /advertise if you'd like to advertise on our podcast, /YouTube to catch these episodes on YouTube instead of a podcast player or something like that, /Slack for the Slack channel, and /deals just gets you onto a page which shows some of the latest deals that we found on the internet to do with WordPress and so on. And a brand new one, this week I bought something on AppSumo called Bot Letter, and it allows me to broadcast messages on Facebook Messenger. So, for example, there's about, 10 people subscribed on there at the moment, not very many, but the principle is that rather than getting an email or anything like that, I can just click a button and it puts something into your messenger coming from WP Builds. And it's really good, actually, because it's just a really simple way of getting something without having to read a long email or something. Anyway, that's entirely up to you if you'd like to do that. That's wpbuilds.com/messenger. I should probably say today the episode is broken up into 3 parts. The first part is the discussion in a moment from David Wormsley and myself entitled Should We White Label WordPress? Then we go on to the interview with Piccia Neri, all about Gestalt design principles. And finally, we go on to the ending fact, which today is called Video Persuades People to Buy Things. There you go. A little bit of background on Piccia Neri. I was at the WordCamp in London, along with quite a lot of the people who frequent our Facebook group recently, and she gave a fantastic talk entitled UI That Rocks. And what she did was she explained, with her design background and her art history background, that websites can be broken down into kind of component parts, and the reason that certain things work, according to Gestalt theory, can be categorized and named. And I didn't really have this vocabulary, so it was genuinely really interesting for me. And hopefully you'll get something out of this talk. And there's a slideshow linked in the show notes that she's provided so that you can look at a PDF. And also, very kindly, she's got a 10% discount with the offer code WPBuilds, all lowercase, for her webinar series that she's putting out just at this moment. So if you're interested in any of that stuff and you would like to get in touch with her and see her webinar series, then remember that you can use this offer code of WP Builds, all lowercase, no spaces, and you get 10% off. Fab. Okay, thanks very much as always for listening to the podcast, and I hope you enjoy it.
And today's discussion is, should we white label WordPress? And I think maybe just to start this off, I should say what we think are the 3 reasons why people might want to do that. And the first would be to hide the tools that you use from your client. The second would be perhaps just to make the UI better for a client, or to reinforce your branding, or any of the above. So Nathan, should we share what we've done?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've dabbled in this a little bit, haven't we? We were talking just before we pressed record. And we've both of us tried various different things and coincidentally arrived at more or less exactly the same conclusion. Taking the point of sort of hiding things, I've tried this before. A few years ago, I had a website and I was just a little bit nervous that the client was going to be that tinkerer. So, excuse me, not having a great deal of experience in doing it, I'm going to have to cough, excuse me. Not having a great deal of experience in doing this and whatnot, I downloaded various plugins. And of course, we're talking about adapting the admin UI so that they don't have so many options. And I hid various things that I thought that they might go and tinker with. So, for example, I hid, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but it was settings and the access to this particular plugin and what have you. But then I kind of got to the conclusion that actually I've got to maintain this and keep making sure that these things are hidden, and that this plugin, which is doing this hiding for me, is going to be updated and maintained. And so, yeah, that's kind of the extent that I've done it. I haven't done anything to try and improve the UI to make it better. Never use that. Really, for me, it's always just been about hiding items that I think the client might accidentally click on and get a little bit too immersed in and perhaps break things. So that's all I've ever done it for. What about you?
Yeah, it's the same, really. It is trying to make the experience better for clients. So I wanted to remove. Do you know what? At the time when I did this and I put it on 4 live sites, I was using the dynamic child theme for Genesis, and it had a lot of options in it. Now, it does allow you, this theme, to save it out as a normal Genesis child theme and remove all the options it has. But I thought, oh, gosh, in that theme, clients can access PHP, JavaScript, and lots of CSS options that could really do damage. So I cleared all of those up thinking the same, but also to make the experience better, I just wanted them to go to the, basic links they needed. But I ran foul for 2 reasons, really. First was I was building the site with my colleague for her clients, and she wanted to do some work on it, and she Googled some stuff to do on WordPress and then came to me and said, stuff isn't here.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah. So that was the first hurdle. And then, the plugin I was using had a bad update. And for a moment, it revealed things it shouldn't and hid things it shouldn't. So
right.
At that point, I thought, why am I doing this? And it's just one more thing to go wrong. So
yeah.
I got rid of it.
I was using functions.php as well and just inserting little snippets just to hide one item or 2 items in particular as well. So I've tried various things, but it's always, for me at least anyway, for a period of time, it was simply about hiding stuff that I didn't want them to fiddle with. I never took the approach that this is improving things, because I'm working on the basis that WordPress of all the CMSs I've ever touched is really beautifully done anyway. I mean, some of the naming conventions are a bit stupid, and some plugins don't really indicate what it is that they do. You use the example, I think, of WP Rocket, which, although it's a caching plugin, doesn't necessarily, the name doesn't really tell you that. So it might be a good idea to change the name of that plugin in the admin menu to say caching or something. But now I've utterly abandoned any white labeling of any description, and I've now got to the point where I figure you'll get what you get, and if I do my job of explaining it well enough, you won't go in and start messing around with things that you shouldn't be messing around with.
Yeah, and that's really where I've ended up. I mean, we only talked a little while back about using WP Rocket, and I was using that, but now I'm changing my plugin. I think that's it. I'm not going to try any white labeling, and it doesn't make sense. We said this, didn't we, when we were talking earlier, that I guess whichever route you go down, you need to be consistent with it. And I think the one that I couldn't do at all, and I don't think you've done, which is to hide the tools you're using from the client for the reason of sort of almost claiming they are your work, so you hide in WordPress itself. And that's.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, there are some examples of that, and I haven't got some new ones, but I always remember Happy Tables. They built their own CMS, if you like, on top of WordPress, and they hid absolutely everything about it. Now, I hear that they're not taking on any new customers, so I don't know how successful that's been long term. But I just think, wow, you really need to know what you're doing to be able to support something like that.
Yeah, I bet there are a heap of people. My guess is it's potentially people who are a bit new to WordPress, or possibly have a little bit of a hang up with with claiming ownership of things and wanting to kind of imply to the client that this is all your hard work. Because we've talked many times about value pricing, and if the client was to get a sniff of the fact that you're using WordPress, which is free, and 16 of these 17 plugins are free, how dare you charge me for the fee that you've charged? Yeah, I guess so. There is that. But to me, it's just too fraught with things to fiddle with down the road. If you're going to hide the WordPress icon and you're going to hide everything here, there, and everywhere, any mention of WordPress, and change the color scheme of the UI and all of that, then I don't know. I just think there's too much to look out for in the future. Too many things could go wrong. And the truth is, you are using WordPress, and from my point of view, that's something to be proud of and something to celebrate. And obviously, now we're doing this podcast. Anybody that comes across me, I'm going to tell them about WordPress and explain how great WordPress is and why it's the best thing on earth, and why we ought to be using it. Because, well, I actually do in my sort of proposal, I go into why use WordPress. I talk about it being open source, so you can examine all the code and it's free. And I even go as far as to mention the fact that if you were to fall out with me at any point in the future, I can't remember the wording I use, but sort of explain that there's hundreds of thousands of people employed around WordPress. So if something was to go wrong with our relationship, you've got 199,999 other people who can help you out. And I think that's a good selling point. So embracing WordPress, explaining WordPress seems like a good idea to me, and hiding it seems a bit silly.
Yeah, I agree. And particularly at the moment, I feel grateful that I've been transparent about all the tools I use because of GDPR.
Yep.
Because if I was pretending it was all my work, and that could just mean I could still reveal that I use WordPress, but I don't say about the plugins I use, or I hide them. At least now, with GDPR, if some of those aren't compliant, I can separate myself from it. I can say, no, the service you buy from me is my skills and help to make you build this site with these tools, but they're not my tools. And I think that's really handy.
Quite a few of the courses that I've been on have emphasized the fact that whilst you're pitching to a client, that initial discovery session, they take the position that it's probably best not to mention WordPress, because you're just trying to find out from them what it is that they want, and then ultimately you come back with a proposal with a price attached to it. And the idea of that being, don't mention WordPress because, well, why would you? You can come back and, rather than explaining you're going to use this plugin and that plugin, you just say, okay, we're going to solve this problem, and don't mention the plugins. I'm happy to do it that way, but I also think it's totally fine to say, we're gonna install a bunch of plugins, some of which will be free, some of which will be paid for, and be open and transparent about it. But I can get it. I can understand both sides of that argument. But I'm certainly more recently moving to the look. Everything's on WordPress, and here we are. And it just occurred to me that you were saying about GDPR. It might be something that I might do, is to put a page together on my website, which just enumerates every single plugin that I've used on any of my client sites, and they could filter down, and okay, you've got a menu item called Facet WP, right? Okay, what does that do? Where did you find it? Who's the author, and so on. And that might offset some of those problems. But yeah, you're right. If you've hidden it and suddenly you've got to explain how everything works.
Yeah, I think that you made a really good point just about the client being able to move on. So I think it is a kind of selling point. That is a great point. Also, WordPress itself is a great selling point, isn't it? I mean, it's the most popular CMS out there. How can you go wrong?
I'm always surprised. A meeting a few months ago, I went and sat down with a guy in his office, and he just said, "Can you just show me how it works?" And I don't even know if at that point we talked about WordPress. It was the first time I'd ever met the guy, and I just said, okay, this is WordPress, and it's a bit like Facebook. You go to this URL and you log in, and that was the level that we were on. And he was totally beguiled by it. He really thought, oh yeah, that's okay. Post is a repeatable thing, and a page, right? Yeah, got it. Okay. Oh, and you just press add new. And before the meeting was over, he was totally loving it. He loved everything about it, and it was simple and it was plain. And I said, look, here it is. It's WordPress. It's free. It's totally available. There's loads of people using it. And for him, that was reassuring. We hadn't really got a relationship. He didn't know my level of expertise or any of that stuff. And he could see that, there's a big community behind this. Okay, this looks like something I can jump on board of. So in that sense, it worked really well. And actually, then I ended up showing him Beaver Builder. And at that point, he was like, oh, yeah, done. Let's do it. It was an easy sell.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I wonder about, actually, they could tell us, because there are some on our Facebook group who do really take seriously the making the UI better. So they will relabel the names of plugins to make them make more sense. And we talked about that before, actually, with Beaver Builder changing from Page Builder to Beaver Builder. And I'm just really interested in their thoughts on it, because, that's extra work for them to do and extra responsibility. I wonder if they let their clients also know what they're using, or whether they are sort of hiding that a little bit, or whether they just do this because they know the client needs to have it made simple. So it's, if you like, an add-on product to what they sell. You've got this stuff, but I'm just going to make it simple for you by labeling it.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we're in the position that you can do both completely legitimately. Like I've said, I've now taken the approach. Actually, that turns out to be incorrect. I've just been looking at a few sites, and I have, in quite a few cases, turned off just a few simple items. Like I've turned off the at a glance box in the dashboard on a few sites, and I've turned off the I can't remember, some of the default WordPress stuff, like the default WordPress news section. I've just switched that off, just because I think it's a bit of clutter. So I am certainly doing a little bit of this, and you're right. It comes from the point of view of not hiding WordPress. It comes from the point of view of just neatening things up a little bit. I've got no problem with that. If you're making the experience better, and you're not trying to kind of claim it all as your own work, then that seems like a good idea. And there are a whole bunch of plugins. Might be a good idea to mention a few, actually, that do this kind of stuff. So, for example, a really popular one, I'm looking at the WordPress.org repo, and it's been installed over 200,000 times, and it's got mostly 5-star reviews, is one called Add Minimize. Have you used this one?
Yes, but for a different reason. On my Beaver Builder live demo sites, I use it because I give more permissions than the software allows. So I give more permissions and hide stuff that I don't want them to see.
Okay, yeah. So this one enables you to actually increase by role what they're allowed to do, not just decrease. It's quite a nice, and basically it presents you with a great big table, doesn't it, of tick boxes, check boxes, and you just go through by user role, by plugin, by WordPress feature, and you just say, yes, you can do that. No, you can't do that. So, for example, you could disable menu links. I don't think it's about changing the names of things particularly. I think it's just about reducing the complexity of what they're looking at and so on. So that's a very popular one. I've used that, but I found it to be, in some ways, over. There's just so much to look at, and often you don't quite know what you're ticking. So anyway, there's another one called White Label CMS, done by the guys over at Video User Manuals, who are also the WP Elevation people. I've not used this one. Have you ever touched this one?
No, I haven't.
No. Again, I think it purports to do the same thing, strips out various items in the admin menu. It's a free one on the WordPress.org repo, and from a trusted source, I would say. Those guys know what they're doing. There's also one which we actually gave away as a competition a few weeks ago as a giveaway, and it's called Ultimate Dashboard. Now, this one is slightly different in that it's not trying to hide anything. It's just trying to make things neater. So it's making extra boxes. So you might have a support box, which is just big and dominates your UI. So instead of having to find a menu item and then click on the Submit Support Ticket option, you would just click this big button and it takes you there. And I quite like the idea of that, because to me, it just neatens everything up without hiding everything. And last but by no means least, two more. There's Ultimate Branding by WPMU Dev, and that's soup to nuts, really. That allows you to change everything, the colors of everything, hide everything, change the login screen and all of that kind of stuff, And then finally, I'm using Main WP, and that allows you to strip things out, and I'm, like I said a moment ago, I'm using it to get rid of the welcome at a glance activity, quick draft, and WordPress news dashboard widgets. So they're my they're the picks of the ones I've used in the past, or sorry, not used, come across, but probably there's a load more. Have you heard of any more?
Yeah, but the one I used, which was by Right Here. And this is unusual for me, getting something from Code Canyon,
Right.
But theirs is white label branding for WordPress. Really a lot of things you can do with that one. I think quite reliable. I think they set it off Code Canyon as well. But yeah, it did give me a slight problem once on an update, and that's why it went. But yeah.
Do you know, it just sort of occurs to me that this is the first time we've ever had a discussion about like a range of plugins at the same time. We've never done that, have we? We always talk about the one thing. It's quite nice that this subject has drawn us into that idea of offering you a bunch of solutions. Please don't take it as an endorsement. I don't really know a great deal about most of these, so just you can experiment and have a little look. So yeah, there we go. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Are you happy? Should we end that topic, or have you got more to say?
No, I've just got to say that it's been useful to me because it's actually made me decide where I'm going with this one, and I think that's the problem, isn't it? We've dabbled, but we haven't made it consistent with who we are. So I've learned.
Well, I think so too. I mean,
no white label.
Yeah, don't white label is my solution, and also because both you and I are putting out content in the WordPress space. In this case, the podcast, and I know you do lots and lots of helpful videos as well. It seems like a marriage made in heaven. You know, celebrate WordPress. Explain to your clients, look, there's loads of free stuff and there's a load of paid plugins as well. Oh yeah, there was one other thing. The other day I got a client who came back to me and said, I want this sort of client portal put in my website, and I just quickly Googled around and found a whole bunch of plugins, and they gave me the specs of what they needed it to do, and I found the one that I thought was the most suitable and went back to the client and said, look, here it is. It's $50 or whatever, something like that. Go buy this. And so that approach of saying, you know, it's a WordPress plugin, you can extend WordPress, go buy this, that made me feel really good because I knew then that the client, if it didn't work out for them, that was on them. Whereas if I'd have sort of claimed, I've managed to work out how to do this for you. You know, it's inevitable. They're going to come back to you and say, actually, it's not quite what we were after. Is it possible that we adjust this? And then all of a sudden, actually, no, I can't do that because it's not my plugin. So I felt good about doing it that way round because them purchasing the plugin and knowing that these were the limitations of what it did made me feel confident to sort of implement it for them.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's kind of like an adult relationship with your clients, isn't it? When you feel that you don't need to, you're confident in your skills enough to say, look, I just use this plugin because there's lots on top of that. So, yeah, but also, I like it.
Think about it from the point of view. I mean, I probably found 6 or 7 plugins that did that exact same thing. And from the client point of view, it was quite, because I told them which ones I was looking at. And then eventually I said, I think this one is the winner. There's value in that as well. I've gone out and done some research for them, found the best one, but also they're aware that, okay, if this one doesn't work out, we've got some other options. It's not like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If this first one doesn't work, we could try these other ones. And honestly, at $50 a throw, that's fine. You know, it's not a lot of time. You get an awful lot for a very small amount of money. So yeah, okay. There we go. That's the little discussion done. Thanks for that. I've learned a bit as well. That was very good. And we'll head on into the interview. Right, it's the interview part of the podcast now. Thanks for sticking with us. On the line, all the way from Spain, I have Piccia Neri. Hello.
Hello, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour.
Oh, you're very welcome. That's very kind of you. The reason that Piccia's on is because, well, actually, I think we've been toing and froing in one way or another for well over a year on Facebook. I think my first interaction with you was when you needed a theme, I believe, and I mentioned GeneratePress, and I think that was the first memory I have of interacting with you. And
for that, I shall forever be grateful.
Yes, well, yeah, it's a good product. And then more recently, just a month or two ago, we actually got to meet up in real life because Piccia was doing one of the longer talks, one of the hour-long talks at WordCamp in London. And being somebody that was interested in what you were saying, I showed up, and I was very, 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 very impressed, I have to say. Not only were your slides beautiful, not only were your no, it was true. Not only were your slides beautiful, but what you said was actually really interesting to me because, well, we'll get onto that in a moment. You ended up telling me a whole load of stuff that I genuinely didn't know, and that's always a great result, I think, when you go to a talk and you actually leave thinking, boy, there's a ton of stuff I didn't know. Perfect. So first of all, we should probably just say that your sphere, if you like, your area of expertise is design. How did you?
Yes.
Well, do you want to just give us a little bit of background on you and tell us about why you've got the chops to talk about design?
Yes, I'll cut a potentially very long story as short as possible because unfortunately I'm getting, longer in the tooth, as I say. So I started off, I have the imposter syndrome that a lot of us have. I don't have it anymore, but I've had it for a long time because I'm not a designer by training. I'm actually an art historian and by training. I did art history at university, which did include a bit of fine art, and then went to did an MA at the Courtauld Institute in London, and then went back to Italy and set up a publishing company for the arts with some friends. And we were publishing all the art catalogues and museum books and things like that in Italy. And that was great. And that's how I started designing. The thing is that, as I do say in the talk, Western design theory is largely based on Western art theory and on Gestalt theory, of that more later. So in fact, if you know about art, you are in a good place to understand design, even though you don't need to necessarily be artistic to be a designer. Anyway, so I did books for a long time and then decided to move back to London because of various reasons, because of the reasons why everybody leaves Italy. But anyway, so moved back to London where I had loads of friends and I loved it, and then got back, carried on designing books and worked with museums, with National Gallery, Tate, British Council, and others, and private galleries as well. But then after a while, I really wanted to do more design, because when you do books, it does become a little bit repetitive. And interestingly, as is the case with websites as well, it's not so much about your imagination. It's about either the artist that's represented in the book or, anyway, the content on the book and of the book. And unless you are producing a book that is an art book in itself, an art object in itself, you can be creative, but in a limited way, which is nice. It's good. I think it's really good to have a brief, but can get boring. So I decided to go a bit more into pure design, so to speak, and started freelancing with agencies. Also, I didn't want to be just doing editorial. I wanted to do different stuff as well that was a bit more creative. So I freelanced with lots of London agencies. Did the London freelancing thing. I was on the desk of the Sunday Times magazine as a freelance for years, and that was fun. That was really interesting. And then I did a lot of branding in all these agencies. I got very much into branding and into logo design, which is only a part of branding. And then started working for the BFI, the British Film Institute.
Oh yeah,
which was fantastic, because there I was. You can't use the word director at the BFI unless you are a director, but effectively I was the creative director of their design department, with all that entails. And I can tell you that it was fun. It was amazing. It was brilliant. It was basically I was watching films for a living, seriously.
Nice.
and then designing posters. And that was the best kind of creativity that I've experienced with a brief. I mean, besides, of course, doing your own paintings and your own photography, but you actually had the confines of a brief and of a subject, but within that, you could be as creative as possible. But you also had the constraints of the brand or having to create a language for the brand. Now, that specific brand had terrible typography and a very unruly logo. So there was, again, these are constraints that make you think in a very specific way. But so that was a fantastic experience, and I got involved in their education as well. And then I left the job itself, but carried on as a freelance for a very long time. And then decided to get into the web, which brings us to the present day.
Right.
So I decided to I started by having my own blog where I was posting one sketch a day, which I carried on for almost a year, which I find, amazing for me.
That's pretty incredible, yeah.
It's defunct. No, it doesn't exist anymore. I sort of let it go to rot.
Yeah.
The drawings still exist. And I realized when I did that I had no idea how to make WordPress do what I wanted it to do. And that really frustrated me because I like to get things to work. So, I became a Photoshop whiz and Illustrator with all these things. I needed to have the tool. I rule the tool. I am the master of the tools. They don't own me. So with WordPress, I didn't have that. So it started getting me really, really curious. And I had designed websites and I'd worked with a web team at the BFI and so on. But really, my knowledge was very minor. But I'm going to say something quite funny, I think. I was an advanced web user. So I knew how to, I was very much into anything that's online. I was, very, very much into that. But I didn't know how it worked. Yep. So I started studying. I started on Lynda, started doing HTML, CSS, because I thought, WordPress, so difficult. I actually found it really, really difficult to understand. But studied, and then went on Treehouse, which I loved.
Yes.
And suddenly WordPress wasn't that mysterious anymore. And then decided that actually what I wanted to do was websites, because that's what everybody needs. And it's nice to do branding, but there are so many things that are not nice about doing branding with clients. So anyway, I decided, I love this. I want to do this. And then moved to Spain, which meant 2 years ago, I moved to Spain, which meant that most of the work had to be online anyway.
Right.
So the easiest thing to work remotely is to do web design.
Yes.
As we all know. So I decided, okay, I had plans to do courses online and things like that, but I thought, but WordPress has to be the way that I sort of put food on the table. And then came across WP Elevation, which is something a lot of us have in common.
And I've been through that.
Yeah, you have indeed. And and then WordPress became my kind of, it's my main thing. What I found with WordPress that I didn't find with design is the community.
Yeah, it's like nothing else. It's amazing.
It's like nothing else, absolutely. And it made me, it's incredible how when we met in London in this pub, and you were looking at people, recognizing them by their profile photo and thinking, oh, here's my friend, he's my friend, he's my other friend. And you think, I've never met these people in my life. And it was fantastic. It was so great. Yeah. It was amazing.
I didn't realize your story was as sort of deep and rich as that. We talked very briefly at WordCamp, and you mentioned about things like the Courtauld Institute and obviously the move to Spain and the move to England and things, but I didn't realize quite how long you've been doing all this stuff. That's fabulous.
I take it as a compliment.
Yeah, no, that's really no. I mean, I think the length of time that you've been doing anything is directly proportional, if you study, to how good you are and how much authority you have. So I think the length of time is a good thing. Yeah, I wasn't implying anything about your age.
No. But my age is it's a good thing, because it means that I'm alive.
Yeah.
If I didn't age, I wouldn't be alive. So I'd rather be alive. Yeah.
Good point. So we got to see you in London. There was a whole bunch of these people who, as you said, met up in the pub the night before, and we all sat and we watched you talk. And the thing that I found really, really cool, I don't know if any of the audience are like me. I can see something and I can say I like it. or I don't like it. But what I don't have is the vocabulary to understand what it is that I'm looking at. I raise my hand and say, quite happily, I'm an appalling designer. I have no design chops. I simply have, I like that, I don't like that. Move it to the left, move it up, and so on. But what you gave us in your talk, which was entitled UI That Rocks, A Practical Introduction to Gestalt Principles applied to the web design. What you gave us is a whole load of vocabulary. Now, my understanding is that this vocabulary that you gave us was limited in that there's a whole lot more. But I was wondering if, over the duration of this podcast, we could talk through some of these vocabulary points and understand what it is that we're looking at on the screen when we use these words. Perhaps the first thing to say is, what is Gestalt? That might be a good place to start.
Yes. So Gestalt was a theory of psychology that was started at the beginning of the 20th century in Germany. Basically, a psychologist saw a visual phenomenon, which was, well, the story, I heard two different stories actually. One is that he purchased a toy that had alternating lights that made you think there was a movement that in fact wasn't there. And then I heard a different story, which, according to which he saw a train signals like panel with lights that were moving. So as the lights were moving, it looked as if there was a light that was going in a certain direction, when in fact it was only lights turning on and off. Anyway, this phenomenon that he saw didn't fit with a particular current or psychology theory that they were studying at the time. So he thought, his name was Max Wertheimer, but I don't have, my German is non-existent, so I probably don't pronounce it well. Anyway, so he thought, okay, we need to work out a different psychology theory of vision that will accommodate this visual perception that I'm experiencing, because I don't know how to categorize it otherwise. So that's how it was born. And Gestalt means, it's a German word that means something like form, shape, or pattern. There is apparently no direct equivalent in the English language. So
okay.
This
so
is kind
of
of
Gestalt
apparently.
Instead, yeah.
Yes, got Gestalt instead, and it doesn't get translated. And basically, it's a study, or it's a categorization of the various strategies or tactics even that our brain uses when it analyzes the visual reality around us. And as the talk concludes, and that as I keep coming to the same conclusion. Basically, our brain, the more I think about, mull it over in my mind, basically our brain doesn't want to work very hard. It's constantly begging us to work as little as possible. Therefore, we have all these systems in place that allow us to go see something, go boom, I recognize that, that's what it is. And Gestalt theory of vision applied to vision, because as you know very well, there's a Gestalt therapy also, which I know nothing about.
No.
So Gestalt theory of vision talks about, analyzes and categorizes the various ways in which our brain tries to think very little. Said really for complete people who have never heard about it before. That's more or less what it is.
Okay, that's perfect, because that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So it's the way that the brain interprets the incoming visual information, and the idea is that we're drawn towards things which require us to think less. And we enjoy those things on a sort of instinctive level. Just as an aside from that, is there in a Gestalt theory then, is there a concept of a better design? So in other words, if we compare one thing to another, can we in a Gestalt way sort of say, well, this is better and this one over here is worse for these set of reasons that the Gestalt theory applies?
Absolutely, yes. And that's kind of why I did the talk, because it gives you going back to what you were saying at the beginning, that you can say, yes, I like it, or yes, I don't like it, but you don't know why. And with Gestalt, you are able to say why, because you can say, well, I don't like it because all these the menu items are too far from one another, and therefore my brain doesn't know that they belong to the same group, because the brain, the eye tends to group together objects that are close to one another. It makes them part of the same group, but that if they're too far apart, we struggle with understanding whether they belong to the same group or not. So this is the kind of analysis.
Well, I was just going to say that was the thing. That was the hook, I think, that I got from the talk was here's a vocabulary for how to describe things, and the more that you think about this stuff, the more that your designs could be tweaked so that they're favourable to as many people as possible. Now, obviously, there's sort of cutting edge design and quirky design and people doing things to shock and all of that kind of stuff, which maybe doesn't fall under this remit. But let's get stuck into it. So what I'll do is I'll link on the show notes, if it's all right with you, Piccia. Can I link in the show notes to the slides that I'm going to be going through and talking about, or you're going to be talking about?
Absolutely. Great. Please do that.
Great.
Yes.
That's perfect. So the first one that we come across, I suppose. Well, actually, do you want to take it? Because I could list them out in order, but that doesn't really make much sense. Do you want to do it instead?
Sure. So yes. So basically, the point of the talk also is, because I just want to say this as a necessary premise, that when I moved to the web and I did it properly, because I jump in things, I don't just do it by halves. I have to understand as in the best possible way what I'm doing. So when I did that, I changed profoundly as a designer, very, very deeply, because the purpose of design on the web is completely different. The set of reasons that why you make a decision are very, 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 very different. So I had to stop myself from looking too cool. Being a Photoshop whiz you should put that aside. Forget that you're that. Totally forget that you are that, because you have to do the opposite. It's not about you. It's about the user. That's the main thing. It's so different. And and it's much more about marketing there. I mean, obviously the film posters are about marketing, but it's very different. So the fact that I changed so deeply as a designer when I started working on the web led me to get to this talk, because I needed to understand what UX is and how UI, what the part that your UI plays and how they need to play together and so on. And that's how I got into Gestalt, for exactly the reason that I said, because I know exactly why, a lot of these principles we already apply intuitively, but I would, my response would be, because I'm a designer and I know that this is against this principle of design, but it doesn't help on the web.
Yes.
It doesn't help on the web. Gestalt helps so much more on the web, because you can really say, because if I took away the UI thing, and the sort of web design angle, this is a talk that anyone can understand. It's not necessarily about web design. I've applied it to web design, but it's not. So basically, without further ado, the principles on the that I examined in the talk. That's what you're asking me to talk about.
That's right. Yeah. I think the first one, emergence, I think was the first one. I could be wrong.
Emergence. So it's, and the image that's one of the most famous ones that you see is this dog sniffing the ground. But in fact, all you see as you first see the image is a sort of, it's lots of black blobs, on the against the white background. And then you go, oh yeah, and I can definitely see what that is. That is a Dalmatian sniffing the ground. And basically, it's the first time that we see how our eyes and brain perceive the scene as a whole. And we don't need to identify the details that make the scene. We can, then we go into it and we see why that is a dog, but we see it without even knowing that we see it. So this is how the main premise of Gestalt is also that we see the whole before the details.
It's a fascinating picture, because really, when you actually look at it, there is no dog.
No.
But there is a dog. And then there isn't a dog, and then there is a dog. It's great.
Exactly. So the details are noticed only after the outline is identified. Only if we want to. It's not actually necessary.
Yep.
And that totally applies to web design, because it's about not getting too creative or too detailed with your shapes, because most people won't notice them. So don't go there. It's about, really, it's about giving your user the best experience possible. Being ornate is not going to reach that.
Okay.
It's not. So that's the first thing. So and we've seen how that image is much more complex than just a dog. So our eyes tend to reduce complex images to simpler shapes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But also, and in general, we perceive the whole before the component parts, and that's where you go to the example of when we see a car, we see a car. We don't see the wheel, the doors, the windows. When you see a bicycle, you see a bicycle. You don't see the spokes. So only if necessary do we go into the detail. But if not, we don't. We don't bother. There's no point.
So this can be applied to the web because you can, you're thinking about the whole page, not all the little intricate little parts, because basically at the beginning they're not going to be noticed.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's very interesting in terms of layout. I've seen also, I think that could be another talk that just talks about layout and Gestalt, because you can analyze various layouts in a Gestalt with a Gestalt approach, and you'll see very different things. What you think you see in your very cool layout is not what the human eye actually sees. Zoom, the first 3 seconds that they land on the page, because let's not forget that we have 3 seconds when people land on the page.
Yeah.
So yes, that's it's a really interesting way actually, and one I will explore further.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I'm building websites, I sweat all these little details, and adjust this and move that and make that a little bit more round or what have you. And the principle here is, people aren't going to take that in right away. So maybe it's worth thinking about that rather than spending hours and hours and hours sweating all the tiny little details. Fascinating. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm not saying be sloppy.
No.
Quite the opposite.
Nope.
The opposite. Design is about precision and consistency more than anything else. I think it's more about consistency actually. So we've already said that some of if the designers who see this talk say, oh yeah, these, they recognize a lot of the principles, because like I said earlier, Western design theory, because let's not forget this is a very, very Western based kind of concepts, set of concepts. It's based on art theory, and it's based on design is based on Gestalt. Maybe designers don't know that it's based on Gestalt, but it is, because also it's we're at the same time as the Bauhaus, more or less, and we're in Berlin, so that's kind of where all these things were, all these principles were set really around those times. So what I looked at in the talk were the most important principles that I think we use more in web design. There are many, many more that I didn't analyze, because also it gets to the point where it's a little bit too much. But anyway, you couldn't fit it in 30 minutes.
No,
as well. And realistically, you these are the ones that are more important and that come up.
Okay, so
more often.
What have we got next? Multi-stability.
Multi-stability is the one that everyone loves. Basically,
I
multi-stability is when you have ambiguous images. The one that I showed was the duck stroke bunny.
Yep.
There's also the old lady stroke young lady profile.
Yeah, there's thousands of these,
there's
isn't
loads.
there? Yeah.
There are so many. And there are artists, that's all they do.
Yeah.
That's all they do. So, and this is when multi-stability occurs when our mind, when there's an object, something that can be, or an image that can be interpreted in two different ways, but our mind can only see one.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And even when you see the other one, you can only alternate between the two views. You can't see them.
That's really fascinating because it's absolutely 100% true. You cannot see the rabbit and at the duck at the same time, and then you can see the duck. I have a set of tiles on my bathroom floor which have this exact feature. Sometimes I see circles, other times I see the gaps between the circles, which look like crosses. So I see circles, a whole floor of circles, and then they're crosses, and it makes me feel dizzy.
I love it. No, that's great. But the thing is, what's really funny is that in this case, what's really interesting more than funny is that there's no way to tell if you, Nathan, will see the duck or the bunny first.
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
It's completely out of our conscious control. It's not predictable, which is why avoid at all costs on the web, and absolutely avoid at all costs. And then I was showing an example of a very clever agency that does very creative work and that use this animation that is a juxtaposition of two of different words that also with a kind of transparency effect as well. It's incredibly clever.
It's jarring though, isn't it? It makes your brain hurt.
Is.
It's basically clever typography. You've got one word superimposed over another word in different colours, and the idea is that you're going to persevere and spend ages working out what both sets of words say. All I see is the red. I cannot see the blue at all. So it's a complete waste of time writing the blue stuff for me.
Absolutely. But also if you're actually on the website, it's even worse, because as you move the mouse and trying to make sense of it and trying to understand it, other things happen, other things move. So you kind of go, it's actually a bit, it's scary even a little bit. Like, oh my God, it's going to happen to me.
It's very clever, but that's where I would say it ends. It's clever, but it doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do. Unless, of course, the purpose is to be clever. And to be noticed for doing something a bit unusual. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But okay, fascinating. Yeah.
But anyway, avoid on the web basically, because you don't, unless it has a meaning.
Yep.
But we still don't know what the meaning is. I mean, it's their portfolio, so they are trying to be clever. But it does nothing for the user basically. So the lesson here is, before making things look cool or pretty or both, please ask yourself, does it help the user? Because if it doesn't, then don't do it, basically. So don't make them think. Again, avoid ambiguity or information overload, basically. Always avoid that.
Yep. Okay, so the next one, I'd never heard of this word ever before, and I'm probably going to say it wrong. Reification?
No, I think you said it right.
Oh,
I mean, in English.
I was paying attention.
Reification, it comes from Latin res, which means thing or object. And it occurs when we see a complete representation of an object, even with limited visual information. And one of the examples that I bring is this sphere that has spikes that come out of it, and the sphere is implied, it's not represented.
Yes.
You can only see it because you see the spikes coming out of it.
And you can really see it. There is a sphere without a shadow of a doubt, but it's not there.
No, it's not there. And the same with the triangle, and that has its the what's it called? The
little
point.
Pac-Mans in the corner.
The little Pac-Mans in the corner, which is a really interesting image, because this image of the triangle and the three, you have to imagine three circles on the top of each point of the triangle, and the triangle is white and the circles are black. So this is an example of reification, because the triangle isn't drawn, but still we see it, as well as multi-stability, because those of us who are old enough see Pac-Man.
Yes.
So there's both there. So again,
it's really clear, the triangle. Like it's basically drawn on the page, as far as my brain is aware. I can. It's almost like the bits where I shouldn't see the edge, I can see the edge. Honestly, you'll have to look at these slides. The audience will have to look at the slides at the same time as listening to
and
this.
They can.
Anyway, the point being that there are shapes there which are not there. They're just implied. And you've given a nice example of this with circles, haven't you, on the internet, widely being used. These sort of progress circles,
progress circles. And the lesson is that your users' minds can fill in the gaps.
Yep.
So less is more. Use white space as a design tool. White space in the sense of the concept,
Yep.
not the color. So use space as a design tool.
I get some
Basically.
sort of innate pleasure from seeing these objects. I really like it. That I kind of recognize on some level that I'm being tricked, and I like it. I like the fact that it's made me think a little bit, and I've puzzled about it, and I've paused for an extra half a second just to look at it. Like with the circles, you've seen these 1,000 times, where the circle is drawn, but then it only gets halfway round, but you still know that there's a full circle there, even though it's all just on a white background and it's a third of a circle or a semicircle. I'm into that. That's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating to actually realize that that's the way our brain works, isn't it? It's
And there's lots of opportunity to use that. You can imply shapes and make the brain work out the missing pieces. You could do that a lot on the web, I would have thought.
Absolutely, you can. And there's another principle that we see further on, which is called closure, that comes from reification, and it works in the same way. And it's a fantastic way of explaining to your clients why you shouldn't crowd things too much. It's again, I'm looking at giving people not ammunition, because it sounds like it's a war with clients, which it isn't. But what's another non-weaponry kind of example? Tools.
There you go. That'll do.
Yeah, the tools to explain why, without having to say, because I'm a designer and you're not, because I like it.
Yeah.
So
that's why I like this whole subject, because it actually gives me words to describe it. I'm going to remember reification. What's next? Invariance.
Yes, and invariance, and actually you'll see, especially with invariance, I find that a lot of these principles actually work together, which is so helpful. So invariance is when the example that I give is Brad Pitt's face.
Who doesn't like to look at Brad Pitt's face?
Who would exactly? Don't tell me you don't like looking at him. It's always a pleasure. So in all the countless variations of the various roles, and the fact that he's aging now, not that it affects anything, but with facial hair, with accessories, with long hair, short hair, different hair color, we still know it's him, unless, as I was sort of not told off, she kindly told me that the lady who gave the accessibility talk, which I loved as well, at WordCamp, said that she's got a facial recognition disability. She doesn't recognize faces, and she proved that to me, because it took half an hour, and then I saw her later and she didn't recognize
it.
Wow. Yeah, so it is. I know it exists. Anyway, in general, the point is that humans have the ability to recognize shapes, objects, faces, regardless of natural and artificial variations, such as scale, elastic deformation, rotation, orientation, things like that. So, and basically, in a way, if you think about it, this invariance also works with any element of your user interface that is repeated. We recognize it even if it changes because of invariance.
You give a lovely example of this typography where the words have been stretched and bent, and essentially they know some of those letters no longer look like letters, but you can recognize them as letters. And I can see what you mean, the principle of stretching things a little bit and making things a little bit quirky, but they'll still be recognized as the object that they're supposed to be. Yeah, very cool. And again, makes that little section there of all the stretched vocabulary, it just makes me stare at it. I just get some sort of innate pleasure from looking at it, because I realize I'm being fiddled with a bit.
But without it, we'd have to constantly reassess the world around us as it changes. So again, it helps us to not think, to think as little as possible. It's just, we go back to that. And it's interestingly in the web, invariance is using captcha, because it's for now is the edge that we have over bots, because bots can't recognize captcha and we can.
Yes. And
Whether
then
we,
sorry, I was just going to say, then we progress on to the slightly more sort of concrete terms. Now that we've got an idea of what Gestalt is a little bit, we go into the more concrete ways that you could apply it. So the first example, this was brilliant to me. I love this one. I think was the one that I liked most of all. The figure/ground idea.
Organizing, yeah. It's when we isolate individual elements from a background, not because they're necessarily bigger, but because we realize our brain understands that it's the most important thing in the image. And I use the image of a lion, which is really tiny, but we see it because immediately it's obviously it's a threat. And it was very useful for our ancestors when they had to detect a predator in the field.
Yep.
Super interesting aside is that as I was researching this, I came across something that I made a note of it and I can't find the note typically. Basically, our brain has evolved. So this is a relatively recent evolution of the brain. Apparently, our cortex, this happens in the cortex, and previously we weren't able to do this. And now we are. I need to find that again.
That's cool. So, I mean, I guess in this case, really cool. Despite the fact that there's a whole vista of mountain and grass and trees and bushes, you just find this tiny little lion. Your brain just zooms in on it. I wonder if it wasn't in the middle of the image, if you'd find it so quickly. But then you you go on to make it a bit more concrete, and you show a picture which is straight from the web, where there are elements that just jump out. They're saying, look at me, because they just stand out in high contrast relief to all the other stuff, and your brain goes, that's important, and that's important, and yeah, brilliant, love it.
Thank you. Well, basically, it's essential in the user journey, isn't it? You need to do it. You need, if that's what you want your user to do, make it stand out and make it stand out properly in a visible way, because in this case, you didn't need to blur the background, but sometimes you might need to do that or use an overlay, things like that.
The funny thing about the lion one is that the lion and the grass that the lion is in are basically the same colour-ish.
Same colour.
But the image below, you have like really high contrast colour. The button is orange and there's a green background. So the button sort of stands out for that reason. And obviously we probably use that all the time subconsciously. A fairly bland background, the button is in high contrast, and so you notice it. But again, just absolutely fabulous. And then similarity.
Yeah, similarity is, these are the grouping laws, the laws by means of which we put objects in the same lot. So the human eye groups together elements that share similar features. Simple as that. And we sort of attribute different meanings to them as well, usually. So the pink arrows clearly means something different. It's the image that I use shows pink arrows pointing upwards and white arrows pointing downwards, and clearly we think that they mean something different and belong to different groups.
Yep. Even though they're the exact same arrow, they're just orientated differently, but the colour suggests something entirely different, totally different purpose.
As well.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Exactly. So again, all things that seem obvious, but then if you have a look around the web, that you realise that, that's when they're not used, that's where things go wrong.
Yes. And a great thing which you see all over the web is, for example, you see icons of companies, and you've got an image here of companies that this company has worked with, and they're all made to be roughly the same size, and they're all made to be exactly the same color. So your brain isn't even thinking, oh, these are together. It just knows it. These things are all supposed to be lumped. In fact, you might as well have drawn a great big rectangle around it and said these are all together. But you didn't have to. It was just implied and very cleverly done too. I think I've used that quite a lot. I am probably guilty of keeping the logo colours, which I think I'll stop doing from now on because I like this more. The colour is the group as well as the space that it's occupying.
Exactly. And as all branding and logo designers know, your logo should work without colors anyway. So if it doesn't, it's their fault, not yours.
Proximity comes next. And this was another brilliant one because it lends itself so beautifully to things like navigation areas and things.
Exactly. So objects that are close to one another in space are perceived as belonging to the same group. Simple as that. So either put them close if they belong together or put them far away.
Yep.
And this is something, it's using white space, as we saw earlier. It's something that's so useful with clients when they ask you to, because clients have a tendency to want to have everything, but the kitchen sink on the page. And you can tell them, no, I can't do that, because if they're all close together, then people won't know what goes with what.
Yep. Yep. I get it. And it works well with the proximity one, especially with navigation, works really well with similarity, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And the example you've given is actually the WP Elevation main menu item. And so you've got items that are close in space, they're the same color and the same font, and then you've just got this tiny little variation. This one of the menu items is the same, except it's a tiny different color. So it shouts out, look at me, and that's obviously where they want you to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
So
nice.
so it's so you can use them both ways as well. So use the laws of similarity by making one item that is the same but different.
Yep.
And that means clearly the eye goes, okay, that's a different meaning there.
Yep. I can imagine. Well, I mean, I've used that a lot with top menu items for the contact button, because that's what people actually want them to do. They want them to pick up the phone and get the contact information. So that's often been the case. Okay, and then we go on to common region. Again, just so simple but so effective. Common region.
Which is what you would have done with the logos.
Yes.
By drawing.
Yes.
It's exactly
yes.
that. Is making item share a same clearly delineated area when they belong to a same group.
Yeah.
Again, so simple.
So simple, but it works.
It works. And if you don't apply it, it's basically this, I think, is very closely related to using a grid as well, but that goes into different principles. But basically, if you think about a Facebook post, if you look at it, or a Facebook ad, for instance, there are so many different areas of elements that perform a different task in it, that if you didn't use the law of common region by delineating the areas, it would be an absolute mess.
Yes.
But because they do, then you understand which area does what. So common and share has a certain function. Above you see something else. It's very clear. And I think that, so far there has been no artistry at play or creativity, nothing at all. It's not what it's about. So, you can, Facebook is boring. It's not, but it's really well designed in that way, because it gets you to do stuff. I mean, not always well designed. Anyway.
I'm a user of Android, and their Play Store, which is the equivalent of the iTunes, or the Apple App Store or whatever, has these lovely little cards, and everything's on sort of a grey background, but it looks on the dimensions are a bit like a playing card, and they're white, and everything fits inside the little white rectangle, and so they're all identical. So you just immediately know, that's one app, that's another app, that's another app, but they're in this wider thing. Oh, they must be the same kind of app. And it doesn't even say it, it just implies it. Okay, they're probably all puzzles. Oh, right, okay, they're puzzles, and these are games for under 10s or whatever. And you just know that they're all grouped together because they have this slight variation in background colour. It's really clever, but I can see the principle of using this all the time. It's brilliant. Yeah,
so if you start looking at a web design considering this, I think you'll feel much less lost than
just that.
Because it's also about all those developers that I see in Facebook groups that go, oh my God, I don't know how to design this, I need inspiration. I think, no, you don't need inspiration. You need to know what to do and how to look at things, and these are the things that help.
Okay, we're getting close to the end. We've got a few more. So the next one is closure.
Yes. So closure builds up on reification, and it's used a lot. The example that I bring is the World Wildlife Fund, beautiful panda logo.
Yep.
So, which is just the shapes basically are not closed. And our mind supplies the missing information for incomplete shapes. So we don't need all of the information. It's a bit like reification.
Yeah, it is.
It's a little bit more complex. And it's used more often in logo design, but it's very useful again in web design because, for instance, on a newspaper, when front homepage, if you didn't use closure, if you had like complete lines to delineate areas, if you your brain would go in complete information overload, because you don't need that. You only need a little, you don't need the four bits of key line to see that it's a rectangle and it separates, and it means something else. You just need two. It's fine, And it's super important when you have a very, very, very busy layout to avoid visual overload, basically.
It's a nice example that you've included, I think, is probably from The Guardian. It looks to me like it's the same font, which is a UK-based newspaper, and it's got lots and lots of little component parts, many of which don't match the other ones, and there's a lot going on in there, isn't there? There's all sorts, but there is a definite area. This is the around the world bit, and it's enclosed. It's got closure, and you get that. Okay, where this bit starts and this bit ends is really cleverly implied. Brilliant, yeah. And the last one, sadly, is continuation. And again, I love this.
It's how I wants. It's not just accustomed to marking our pathways and following them. It wants to do that. We want to be told where to go. We want arrows. We want lines. So if we see a line, even though it's made of dots, so in theory it's not continued, we still take it as a flow and we follow it. Our eye follows it. So bearing that in mind, you can really lead your users through the journey that you want them to go into. We can be clever like that, and we can really make them go somewhere. So someone asked me actually after maybe it was the Madrid talk. Anyway, someone asked me whether it was all right to use an arrow for a button, because I'd said don't be too clever, and I said, an arrow that takes you to the next page, as if, and I said, yeah, absolutely, yeah, people will go to the arrow. Yes, totally, do it. So, and then the example that I give here is a Google map. When you ask for walking direction, it comes out as dots.
Yes.
Even though, so we perceive it as a continuous line, even if it's incomplete because it's made of dots. And then I have the rant usually here.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah,
it's terrible. But I was using it yesterday again, and I was like, seriously, the dots go over the street in a way that makes it impossible to read the name of it. And if I go to the written instructions, then I don't understand them anymore because I'm visual. But I can't check if I'm on the right street. I actually have to walk down it and then see where the dot that represents me, which is also blue. So it goes, seriously, Google, not good.
So it's a good example of using continuation, but poorly implemented because it covers up the stuff that you actually want to see.
I find it extraordinary that it's never changed.
Yeah.
In the car, it's even terrible. I remember being lost. I was driving in Jordan by myself in the car, and I was using the iPad as my navigation, and I couldn't see a thing. It was like blue. It's a continuous blue line with a blue dot on it. And you're like, I don't see the blue dot. I don't know where I am. I am in Jordan. And Google, you're making me lost. Anyway, apart from, I love a rant.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Well, sadly, the bits and pieces that you demonstrated to us are in the London WordCamp talk. We've come to the end of that slideshow. I will put that in the show notes. I'll make it very prominent so that you can all go and download it. And if you are listening,
there's
to this
no opt-in, by the way. It's a straight download, no opt-in.
That's great, thank you. And it might make more sense what you've just heard if you go and look at this after the event. But like you say, there was an awful lot more that you could have said. I obviously don't know what those words are because I'm completely ignorant when it comes to Gestalt and web design. But yeah, maybe more to be said on another occasion, on another talk. But thanks for coming on. Do you want to have a couple of minutes to explain about what's going on in your life and where you can be found online and initiatives that you're taking part in?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So coming from all this, because it's something that I was brewing in my mind anyway, because I really saw the need for this, was that actually as the incredible response to the London and Madrid talk had. So I've set up a Facebook group since, which is called Design for Geeks, Techies, Devs and Marketers. So basically design for anyone who needs to build websites on a daily basis, but is not a designer, and sometimes gets lost, and maybe I read of people that go to Pinterest for inspiration, but what they need really is a bit of design knowledge, which is not artistic, because they think you need to be artistic. No, I think this has proved it. And so as part of that, I'm also, because everybody keeps asking for it, so there's going to be an extended version of this talk as a webinar on Tuesday, May the 15th, and it will be in the group as well. It will be posted in the group, and it will be in the group for a while, and then it will be moved to the new website designforgeeks.com.
Oh, cool.
There is a webinar series on Design for Geeks that's starting very, very, very soon. The best thing is if you're interested, is to join the Facebook group, because there will always be information in there, or check the website designforgeeks.com.
Okay.
That will always have everything that you need to know.
Well, what I'll do is I will put the links as they become available. I'll put them in the show notes. So there's the Facebook group, and there's the designforgeeks.com website where you can be found. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Maybe it was difficult to understand because you can't see the slides. I would encourage you to go and get the slides and listen to it at the same time. Possibly should have said that at the beginning. I'll make sure to write it in the show notes. But yeah, an absolute pleasure. I would hope to have you on another time when we've got some more interesting stuff for you to tell us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an honor.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was lovely.
Thank you, Nathan.
And today's ending fact again comes from impactbnd.com, and we're looking at the list we've been looking at all the way through this, and we're on article number 14. Video helps persuade 73% of people to buy a product or a service. And there's some great extra facts on top of this. There's a link actually that goes to it, and I just thought this was wonderful. I'm going to be talking too much, Nathan. You'll have to butt in.
No, that's fine. You go for it.
Okay, it says social video generates 1,200% more shares than text and image combined. That's amazing.
Wow. That's significant.
Yeah. Well, we agree with it, don't we? Because we know that video affects us. We were just talking.
Yeah, I'm a big sucker. So, for example, if I go to a site where, let's say, for example, I go to AppSumo, which I do quite a lot, the text is of very little interest to me. That comes after looking at the video, because usually when they promote a product, there's a video with it, and it's usually a marketing video. It's not made by AppSumo, it's made by the company themselves trying to promote it. But that's always what I click first. Watch the video, then I click on their homepage, look at their homepage, but the video always comes first. And then finally, if I like what I see, I might actually read some of the text. So yeah, I'm a sucker for it. But video works well in that case because it's a technical product. I'm buying something with ins and outs and technical things that I want to know about. I wonder how it would work for things like, I don't know, if you owned an e-commerce site selling trainers or food or something. That's a difficult proposition to sell through video, I would have thought.
I think it gives you more clues. And there's another statistic here that 62% of consumers are more likely to have a negative perception of a brand that publishes a poor quality video. And that definitely comes into play. I look at videos often, and it's unconscious that I'm actually judging the quality of the company that's selling me something. And I probably can get away with skipping a video when it comes to products on a shop, because I can see the product and that's probably all I need to know, and the description.
But sometimes even just, if you're buying a widget from Amazon, sometimes just seeing a video of it spinning round so that you can see what it looks like in all dimensions, that kind of makes a difference. I'm totally with you. It's more like the real world, isn't it? And presumably, give it 5 years, we'll be all about AI and VR. So we want to be immersed in a video experience that actually puts us in the same room as that object before we buy it, so we can really truly understand it. It doesn't surprise me. I'm a sucker for video every time.
Yeah, me too. I think a great way, personal branding, I think, with videos are really helpful.
Well, there's
Know
an
who
awful
you're
lot of
dealing with.
platforms coming out now, aren't there? Sort of SaaS products which enable you to create these videos really trivially. You know, you drop in a few images, add some text, and it automatically produces a video for you with the text and the images and a bit of music all in the background. So obviously somebody's worked out there's muck. Where there's muck, there's brass.
But actually, this is almost turning into discussion now. But I wonder whether they work, because people can easily put those kind of things together. They don't give you a real insight to the company.
Yeah, good point. Well, anyway, sucker for videos, love them all the time.
Yeah,
love the videos.
Me too.
Yeah. Right, let's say goodbye to this episode. As always, thank you if you managed to get this far. Amazing stuff. Have a biscuit. We would like to say thanks and share it all over the place. iTunes reviews, wherever you go, just share it. Thanks, that'd be great. And cheesy music will be coming in, but I'll say goodbye from me, Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk.
And it's bye-bye from me, David Wormsley. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.